ledge. Fire!
Let's go!
Let him have it!
The Thompson Submachine Gun, one of the most prolific weapons in movie history. Used by the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson in Moonwalker, all the way to James Cameron's Aliens, the Thompson is one of the most recognizable weapons on Earth and in space.
Hold up!
There is virtually no American World War II movie without a Thompson, just as there is no gangster film without a Model 1921 with a drum magazine. The Thompson is so prolific that even Tom Hanks himself couldn't use the weapon in just one genre. So let's take a look at the history of the Thompson and some of the movies it has been featured in.
The way you run, I don't think so.
The Thompson was first developed in the 1910s by General John T. Thompson, imagined at first as an automatic rifle, but the design worked best with the .45 ACP pistol round, so it would become a submachine gun, imagined as a trench broom in World War I, but it wasn't refined in time for use during the war.
Okay, folks, hold your paws and drop your drawers.
The first prolific version of the Thompson would be the 1921, manufactured by Colt, which was one of the highest quality versions of the Thompson, sharing more characteristics with a high-grade sporting weapon than a mass-produced Army submachine gun.
Did you check it already?
Yes, I did.
Then leave it alone.
Some of the first users of the M1921 were the police, and even the Irish Republican Army, as accurately seen in the film Michael Collins, though there is no doubt this weapon gets the most screen time in the hands of gangsters.
I'm gonna give you to the count of 10 to get your ugly, yellow, no-good keister off my property before I pump your guts full of lead.
All right, Johnny, I'm sorry.
The M1921 was actually a poor-selling firearm on release. It sold for the equivalent of around $3,000 and came with a 20-round stick magazine. At first, the firearm actually received complaints about not having enough stopping power or penetration and lacking accuracy at distance, as the submachine gun was still a new concept to many. Of course, the .45 ACP cartridge would be considered a heavier round by the time it was compared to other World War II submachine guns.
Okay.
In the 1920s, the gun became a status symbol for gangsters who utilized its rapid fire and portability, but most importantly, the intimidation factor that came with the weapon. Having a cool nickname likely added to its popularity in an age of flashy gangsters. The gun was called the Chicago typewriter, as it supposedly sounded like a typewriter in the distance throughout Southside Chicago.
Now listen, you. Say, that's nice material.
It ought to be. It cost a bundle.
Get out of them.
Hey!
I said...
Just a minute.
You too!
The M1928 Thompson would be the first Thompson widely used by the US military, which is very similar looking to the M1921, but had a slower and more controllable rate of fire, dropping down to around 700 rounds per minute from 900. The M1928A1 would add provisions for a sling, and finally replace the distinctive pistol foregrip with a horizontal one.
Some great news. Tell them.
There's gonna be a huge international shipment coming through.
We got the time, the place, and the whole shebang.
Commonly, M1921s and 28s are shown with drum magazines on film. The drum magazine is an interesting feature, as militarily, it's actually quite bad. But in the 1920s, it was popular in part because civilians didn't field test magazines in the same way the Army did, and also because gangsters didn't want to worry about carrying extra magazines on them, and intimidation is sometimes a tactic within itself.
Key in the ignition, turn the ignition on, and nothing happened.
These drum magazines holding 50 or 100 rounds were excessively heavy, rattled while you moved, and were terribly slow to change out, and made clearing a stoppage a pain. Again, maybe not things all too important to a gangster versus a soldier.
Hand me that chopper.
Say, what line of work you in, George?
Thompson M1928s, M1s, and M1A1s are primarily what you find in World War II movies, and they were used by the US for the entirety of the war, as well as by the British and Commonwealth nations. Easiest way to spot an M1 is by the charging handle on the side of the receiver and not on the top. It will also never have a drum attached. The M1A1 has a distinct rear sight guard and is the version you'll most commonly see in Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, or the Pacific.
Shooting. I love that stuff, you know, the killing.
A lot of killing. Yeah.
The Pacific, Band of Brothers, and Saving Private Ryan have some of the best examples of how to properly use the Thompson Submachine Gun, which is through controlled, aimed bursts. Watch Robert Leckie ambush a Japanese patrol here. He gives each enemy soldier an aimed burst with his Thompson snug against his body. He takes a split second to re-aim between bursts. He even does what appears to be a tactical reload while running back to his squad.
Cigaretten? Here you go.
Now to showcase what poor automatic fire looks like, here is a clip from Kelly's Heroes. A great movie, by the way, and I apologize for picking on it. Watch this spray and pray, untrained use of the weapon, sometimes with both eyes closed. Funny enough, in reality, this sort of fire did certainly take place amongst poorly trained GIs. How realistically the Thompson is used in gangster films is less important, as they were likely not professionally trained. Also, shooting from the hip with a heavy drum makes sense, especially if you're unloading a magazine into a car. It was common to excessively shoot up these older cars, as their thicker metal doors could actually stop a round from a submachine gun.
Good luck, ladies.
One interesting historical detail regarding the Thompson in Saving Private Ryan is the use of plyofilm. You can see it being used here on Captain Miller's Thompson to protect it from water and sand. Soldiers would also use condoms to protect their weapons during beach landings.
I never could score with him. How about you, Johnson?
Not me.
Probably the oddest Thompson scene in Saving Private Ryan is Captain Miller shooting through a Tiger I's vision port. These are protected with armored glass and can also be fully closed, but maybe he got lucky and the driver was changing the glass in the middle of a battle?
Maybe you should shut up.
Here's an interesting scene from the bridge on the River Kawai. It shows a Japanese soldier guarding POWs using a Thompson submachine gun. This may actually be historically accurate, because POW guards were considered less important and given used weapons, such as what might have been captured from the British in Singapore. So was the Thompson a good submachine gun? It had some good features, particularly the double-column staggered feedbox magazine, which contributed to the gun's overall good reliability. It did have to be cleaned regularly and was heavy at 4.5 kilograms or 10 pounds empty. It was considered accurate, had an effective firing range of 150 meters. The rounds had decent stopping power, though there is debate about the worth of this for the extra weight compared to smaller rounds used in the British Sten or German MP40. Ultimately, the Thompson was a good submachine gun for the Allies, especially filling gaps in production early in the war. However, it was expensive for most militaries during World War II, and cheaper stamped metal submachine guns were favored from a production standpoint. After the war, the Thompson saw significant use around the world, but the American Army would end up favoring their cheaper M3 grease guns over the Thompson.
Is that guy cone of phrase?
Alright, I'm Johnny, and that was my quick movie brief on the Thompson, one of the most highly collectible and iconic firearms ever created. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Hog Weller, you miserable horse-eating son of a... Damn, we're in a tight spot.